Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for stepping inside away from this glorious, probably global warming related weather we're currently having for today's seminar. My name is Jack Yates. I'm a senior business reporter at Farmers Weekly, and I will be looking after you for the next hour or so. In a little over a month's time, Making Tax Digital will come into effect, and the VAT submission process will change. Businesses using non-compatible software or entering figures directly onto HMRC's website will no longer be compliant. For many farm businesses, this will mean purchasing new software, which has been approved by HMRC. Which is why Farmers Weekly has teamed up with Baldwin's Chartered Accountants, FarmPlan, and the Institute of Agricultural Secretaries and Administrators to host this live panel discussion. We'll explain exactly what Making Tax Digital means for agricultural businesses, including the implications, solutions, and possible benefits of these changes. Now, before we get started, we are going to conduct a quick poll just to see how prepared everybody thinks they are for Making Tax Digital. So coming up on the screen in front of you should be a poll that gives you two options. If everybody could cast their votes, we'll just give you a few seconds to make sure you get those through, and then we'll get started. So. Okay, so the results of the poll are in. We've got 59% of the votes say they are prepared for Making Tax Digital, and we've got 41% who aren't. So hopefully by the end of the webinar today, we will have got those numbers up, and people will be a little more confident in the changes that are coming up. So. Without further ado, I will now introduce our speakers today. So first of all, we have Russell Frayne, who is Associate Director at Baldwin's Accountants. We will then hear from Anne Chankey, who is a consultant with farming software FarmPlan. And last but not least, we have Christine Thompson from the Institute of Agricultural Secretaries and Administrators. Before we hand over to the first speaker, Russell, if anybody has any questions throughout the webinar, please use the question box just below, and we will answer as many as we can before the end. So without further ado, I will hand over to Russell Frayne from Baldwin's. Russell.
Thanks, Jack. First, I'd like to thank FarmPlan, Farmers Weekly, and the Institute for having us together to do this session. As Jack said, I'm from Baldwin's Accountants. We've done quite a lot in terms of Making Tax Digital for our clients, and it's good to be able to come to speak today. So hopefully after my section, we'll have a bit of a better understanding of what Making Tax Digital is, how it's going to affect you, and I would pass you over to Anne and Christine, who will then be able to go into more depth in terms of how that's likely to affect the rural sectors. So first of all, really, it's an overview of what Making Tax Digital is. So the first thing to say is it's a government-led initiative. This isn't from accountants or bookkeepers. It is actually a government-led initiative to modernise and digitise the tax system. The reason behind this is there's currently a deficit in terms of the tax that's being collected at source in the small medium enterprise remit. And hopefully, the aim is to avoid errors and omissions in terms of bridging that tax gap. The long-term view is not only for just VAT, but also for other taxes to be included. The first port of call is Making Tax Digital for VAT, but other taxes are likely to follow thereafter. The requirement is fairly simple, really, it's to record and submit your VAT returns digitally. So what Jack was saying in his prelude was that you'll no longer be able to type this information manually in with HMRC. That will affect people in a different sort of way. So we currently will have individuals that will be doing manual records, using spreadsheets or using some form of software. Each person will be affected slightly differently, but the Christine and Anne will go into that in a bit more detail thereafter. So who does this affect? So all of you guys that are VAT registered currently with taxable turnover over the £85,000 threshold will be required to submit MTD VAT returns from the 1st of April 2019. The question mark here is over what is taxable turnover, as in the rural community you receive income by way of subsidies, for example, which will form quite a high proportion of income for some. Obviously this isn't taxable income, so when looking at whether you qualify under or over the 85,000 mark, this is something to consider. From April 2020, VAT registered businesses below the 85,000 threshold and the earliest for the other taxes would come into force. So the question mark here is, what is a digital link? So a digital link, broadly speaking, is a link that allows the data or source data to be imported, exported between programs. So for example, your source information of recording your VAT returns needs to not only talk to, but also receive information from HMRC without any manual intervention. Of course, there's software available to do this. There is a HMRC list of approved providers, and this list is growing by the day. The recommendation from within Baldwin's is always to speak to your accountant, your bookkeeper, or those advising you in terms of your accounts or bookkeeping requirements in order to make sure what the most suitable application would be for you. In terms of the VAT obligations, the information that needs to be retained digitally is as follows: the business name, principal place of business and VAT registration number, and also any accounting schemes that you use. For each supply that you make, you will need to record the time of the supply, the value of the supply, and the rate of VAT charges. Subsequently, for each supply that you receive, you must record the time of the supply, value of supply, and the VAT amount that's not reclaimable by you, and the amount of input VAT that you can claim. In respect of the majority of those points, many businesses probably don't capture that information unless they're using software. In terms of reviewing your existing systems, first of all, you have clients that are using manual records. For those guys, you're going to have the biggest impact under Making Tax Digital, as you don't actually meet the requirements in terms of recording or submitting the information digitally. So there'll need to be changes made here. If you're using spreadsheets, these are classed currently as a digital record. However, in order to make your submission, you'll need to submit via an API bridging software, which isn't in order to be compliant. Obviously, if you're using software, you'll need to check what version of the software that you're using currently, whether it's going to be compliant and whether that will need to be upgraded. In terms of your bookkeepers and accountants, if they're providing this service, have the conversation with them, and we would hope that they would be compliant. There are exemptions for Making Tax Digital. Each of these are taken on their own merit, and you would need to contact HMRC direct in order to make application for these. But broadly speaking, if your turnover is below £10,000, there's an exemption. If you're subject to insolvency, there's an exemption. But also, if it's not reasonably practical to retain and submit your records digitally by way of age, location, disability, or religious grounds, there's potential for an exemption. As I said, these cases will be taken on a case-by-case basis. In terms of penalties, there are penalties that will apply for people not complying under MTD. The default surcharges will still apply. This will not be affected at all. There's a general penalty for failure to comply, which will be capped between £500 to £1,500. There's a record-keeping penalty, which the revenue can levy at £500, as well as a filing method penalty of £400. In the first 12 months, there will be a soft landing period where these penalties won't apply, but this does not apply to those who are not maintaining a digital record. So those of you that are maintaining digital records and trying to submit in the first 12 months would not be subject to a penalty. under the basis that you're trying to comply with the digital requirement, but the revenue accept that there will be teething issues in terms of doing so. For those that are not meeting that requirement, the penalties will apply, as well as the default surcharges. What I'll do now is pass you over to Anne from FarmPlan, one of the software providers that are MTD compliant, and she will run you through the next slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russell. Just to reiterate, my name is Anne Janke. I'm a chartered accountant who's been working with FarmPlan to develop their software to meet the requirements of MTD. In my role, I've had many meetings, conversations and consultations with HMRC, which has actually given me a great opportunity to ensure that the particular concerns of the agricultural industry are listened to. This doesn't only apply, to MTD for VAT, but continues to be invaluable for the time ahead when we're looking at MTD for self-assessment taxes. Also, as part of my role, I've been keen to ensure that farmers are given all the information that they require in order to make the transition to filing their VAT returns using MTD as smooth as possible. There have been lots of myths bandied about. At best, they're frightening, and at worst, they're totally misleading. So I hope today we can clarify what's required, by whom, when, and how. The first thing that businesses really need to consider is whether MTD actually is mandatory for them. If you're VAT registered, then you will be able to use MTD, but it's not necessarily compulsory. If you're below the VAT threshold, then you can choose whether to take part in MTD submissions or whether to continue to use your existing systems. The threshold is currently a taxable turnover of £85,000. Taxable turnover isn't your total turnover. It includes the standard rated, reduced rate and zero rated supplies, but it excludes exempt supplies and income outside the scope, such as your basic payment scheme payments. So, bear in mind when trying to work out whether you have to comply with these regulations that the BPS, higher level scheme payments, all those sort of things are outside the scope of this. If you're not at all sure how to work this out, then your accountant is the best person to talk to. Even if you are below the threshold, you can still opt to sign up for MTD. And you might decide to do this because it will be a much quicker and easier way to actually file your VAT returns in future, although it might seem a bit daunting at the moment. The next thing you need to consider is if you're going to be mandated to send your submissions via MTD, then when will you have to join? The date that HMRC have said is from the 1st of April, but that's quite vague and it depends when your VAT periods are. If you have a VAT period that straddles the 1st of April, you will not need to send your return by MTD until the next return. So it won't be compulsory for any period straddling the 1st of April. This table here gives a few examples, but it's available for anyone to see on our website if you want to refer to it again later. So now you know when you need to join. Next point really is to consider whether you've got the systems in place and whether those systems meet the requirements. Russell's already covered what it meant by digital records, so I won't go through that again, but it is obvious really that if you're still using pen and paper, you'll need to sort something out. If you're using spreadsheets, you might be able to carry on with those as they are, but they will need to be combined with some bridging software, which will actually send the data to HMRC through a secure API link. Okay, if you need to upgrade your existing systems, there are, as Russell has already said, there's a whole host of alternatives on the HMRC website. Unfortunately, though, you're not given any guidance about which one is the best one for your business. So I would say here that it's worth considering looking at a package which is actually tailored to the agricultural sector. You'll see many generic packages at the moment advertising on TV and the like, and they tend to be for very simple systems, for very simple business models. They often don't offer any telephone support, They might not be available offline, so if you haven't got a very good internet connection, then you're only going to be able to access your figures when the internet's working. They quite probably won't have sort of standard agricultural terminology and categories set up. And they quite probably won't have the facility to combine VAT figures from more than one system. One of the things we have discovered during our consultations with HMRC and with our customer base is that there are a lot of farming businesses that have a really sort of diverse range of enterprises, such as a farm shop alongside a livestock enterprise or even glamping and holiday lets. And often these diverse businesses keep their records on more than one system. Now, that will be absolutely fine to keep your records on different systems, but you've still got to send the total VAT figures from one system. They can't be sent in chunks from different systems. So, one of the things that we've built into our software is a system for importing VAT figures from other systems so that we can combine them all together and send the total VAT return to HMRC. And again, a lot of the simple systems out on the marketplace won't offer that functionality because for them it's not a very common situation. Okay, once you've got your compliant solution in place, this isn't the end of the process, I'm afraid. You still need to sign up with HMRC. So this is actually to sign up for a Making Tax Digital account, and you do this through the .gov.uk website. You'll have to enter your VAT number, and it'll take you through a series of other identifying questions until they've set up your account. You'll need to allow 72 hours for the creation of this account, and the HMRC will then send you an email to say that your account's been set up and you're ready to make your first submission via MTD. At this stage, you'll no longer be able to go back and send your VAT information on the old system, so you will have moved onto the new system at this stage. Once the HMRC MTD account has been set up, the final stage for you is to link your accounting software to this account so that the two will talk to each other and you can make your VAT submission. This linking process doesn't have to be done every time you go in. I think HMRC have said they're going to renew it every 18 months, but other than that, it'll just be a click on a submit button every month or every quarter once the linking's been done. Now, if you are an agent, I'm afraid there's one further step that you have to do. And in fact, you can do this one straight away. You don't have to wait. And that is to create an agent services account. And then you can link your clients to this. This is a new account. It doesn't replace your existing Government Gateway account, and that will continue to be active for other services. But for MTD, you will need this new account. Now, obviously, I've gone through that very quickly, but there's a whole raft of resources on our website for anyone looking for more in-depth knowledge on Making Tax Digital. These are available to customers and non-customers alike, so you don't have to have bought our software to see this information. So there's a huge selection of frequently asked questions and lots of latest information on our blog. And then we also, provide webinars and training courses. So if you, at the end of this process, still feel a bit in the dark, do have a look at our website. I'm now going to hand over to Christine for her part of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Anne. Good afternoon, I'm Christine Thompson. As Jack said earlier, I'm current Vice Chair of the Institute of Agricultural Secretaries and Administrators, that I'm going to refer to as IAGSA from here on. I farm in partnership with my husband David on a tenanted farm of 600 acres in North Yorkshire, and until 2014 I ran our own farm secretarial business, but I've remained involved with IAGSA both on council and as part of their training team. The bookkeeping has traditionally been carried out, quite understandably, by the more senior members of the family, and the introduction of Making Tax Digital is, in many cases, now being handed over to the younger generation. Unfortunately, over the past 10 years or so, there has been a lack of college courses available that actually teach the basics of agricultural bookkeeping, and this perfectly capable younger generation are now therefore wanting to increase this particular skill. IAGSA actually recognised the lack of courses some 6 years ago and created their own training programme to fill that void. We also developed our own workshop designed specifically for members of farming families who undertake their own bookkeeping. Entitled, Is Your Bookkeeping Fit for Purpose?, the workshop has been delivered across the country in collaboration with the likes of the Yorkshire Agricultural Society, the Prince's Farm Resilience Programme and various farmers training groups. Throughout this process, we've identified 3 different groups of farming businesses. Group 1, who are indeed ready for that transition to digital submission of VAT figures. They've most likely been fully engaged with all the legislative and technological developments since the late 60s and early 70s, and their existing software systems will be made compliant. Group 2 are the people that have been attending our workshops. They're aware of the change and are actually seeking help and advice. They've been successfully using the manual systems that were probably part of the City and Guilds examinations at agricultural colleges in the 70s and 80s, and that have absolutely satisfied their requirements to date. Some have successfully used spreadsheets for calculating figures. Some have even created their own bespoke spreadsheets that have given them good management information in addition to the required legislative figures. Some have either been advised by their accountants or, unfortunately in some cases, told that they need to move to a cloud-based system. Although these systems are going to be the way forward, being cloud-based isn't actually a requirement of making VAT digital. Group 3, this is always a third group, they're either still unaware of the changes despite the more recent publicity, or they're still probably hoping that making VAT digital won't actually happen. They're probably those businesses who are reluctant to engage for whatever reason. They may lack computer skills and don't have younger members of the family to help. They may have poor internet connections that limit the use of some of the cloud-based accountancy systems, or they may simply not have time. Indeed, much of the work carried out by IAGSA members has actually been created by the simple fact of the farmer not having the time to carry out the bookkeeping work themselves. Let's face it, starting to concentrate on invoices, bank statements and VAT returns at 8 or 9 o'clock after a hard day's work is not easy, and that's when mistakes can happen. Therefore, their only option may be to hand this work over to either their accountant or a qualified farm secretary, both of which will run bureau systems. But they can actually rest assured that that option is there for them. Making VAT digital is probably the biggest change that has occurred since the introduction of VAT back in 1973. It's important that farmers choose systems that can easily handle the idiosyncrasies of farm bookkeeping. So what sets agricultural businesses apart from others? As most of our outputs are zero rated because they're going into the food chain, farmers mostly reclaim VAT. Funnily enough, the most frequently heard question in our particular world is, how much VAT have I got coming back? And in all honesty, it does help the cash flow. Other businesses have more control over their invoices. As Anne said earlier, you will see TV adverts for general accountancy packages whereby the invoice is issued before the tradesman has even left the premises. We never know what we will receive for our goods until the payment arrives, often with deductions. Other businesses have offices and can easily identify business expenses. Our businesses are also our homes, and therefore there's an element of private apportionment required. I referred to our workshop at the start of the presentation. Feedback forms have identified that the most useful content has been on farm accounts terminology, the provision of an update of VAT schemes, thresholds, categories and rates, the bank reconciliation that ensures all relevant entries have been made, and lastly, the production of enterprise gross margins. One of our main findings has been the fact that there is still confusion out there with regards to the structure of VAT itself. Most now know the threshold, especially after all the publicity. However, there's confusion over the various schemes, with some not really sure of the difference between standard and cash accounting schemes. They've simply followed what has been done in the past. The VAT categories cause the most confusion and, dare I say, controversy. Attendees have returned home to check into which VAT category they have been placed in the basic payment scheme and environmental scheme payments. As Jack referred to earlier, both are classed as that being outside the scope of VAT, and we have in a number of cases discovered that taking that income out of the equation means that it has brought some smaller farmers below the actual threshold. Most attendees know the standard, reduced rate and zero categories, but can be very unsure of what is classed as exempt and out of scope. There can often be varying differences of opinion on how items are categorised, depending on past advice given, and it's therefore no wonder that this can be confusing. Obviously, the amount of VAT claimed or paid makes no difference, however the categorisation can affect the threshold level. Everyone is thankfully aware of the current rates of VAT. Although making VAT digital is forcing change, it also presents the opportunity to completely review the current farm office processes that, in some cases, may not have changed for over 40 years. With Brexit around the corner, we will all need to monitor each enterprise within the farm business, and therefore it would be a shame not to embrace this particular change. So, going forward, we have to make decisions based on informed considerations. Firstly, who is going to be responsible for carrying out the bookkeeping process that will provide the figures required for making VAT digital and, in the longer term, making tax digital? We must be able to choose a software system that suits the future needs of the farm business, in addition to the information required by HMRC, the accountant and the bank manager. We have been encouraging everyone to fully research both the general accountancy and bespoke farming packages that are available. Think about the management information that will be required post-Brexit. I know that should our basic payment scheme income reduce or disappear, then it will leave a very large hole in our current business. Check that there is an easily available support helpline at hand. If using a software system for the very first time, then you will need support. Everyone does. And having someone at the other end of the phone that knows the software and agricultural terminology is a must. Speaking of someone who is truly Yorkshire born and bred, I know only too well how tempting it is to choose the cheapest system available. But if it doesn't satisfy all your legislative and your management requirements, then it can lead to false economy in the long run. Our conclusions are that there is a large gap in bookkeeping skills within the agricultural industry, which we constantly try to fill. The introduction of making VAT digital has emphasised this point, and now is the chance to ensure that we all get it right. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much to our three speakers. We've covered a lot of ground in those three presentations. We've had quite a few early questions come in. Now is a really good time to anything that you feel wasn't answered or any burning questions that you still have, if you fill those in just whilst I'm talking now, that would be really good. And if I can ask all of the speakers to unmute their microphones as well, I will get the ball rolling with the first question. I think maybe Christine, this might be best placed for you. Making Tax Digital is going to see a huge increase in workload for farm administrators and accountants. Is there enough staff out there to cope with this increase, do you think, Christine?
I think there is, yes. We were struggling a little a couple of years ago, but with the training programme that we've created, we've seen a lot of really, really good professional young people wanting to come into the industry. We were actually down at Stoney for a 2-day training course this last Friday and Saturday. Fantastic bunch of people, and we're there to help them on the way.
Great. Russell, do you want to come in on this one at all?
Absolutely. We've over the last couple of years in Baldwins, we've invested a lot of time and effort in terms of becoming platinum status with a number of software providers in order to basically have the training support network there in order to be able to deal with this. It's not a short-term fix. And in terms of the staff that you have, not only are you relying on your clients to adopt this sort of software or technological approach, but in some cases you're having the same struggles with staff. So it's all about training, upskilling the staff at the same time. But in terms of the sort of efficiencies that can be made by using the sort of software processes to their sort of maximum capacity, then yeah, the sort of demand that this will sort of create will be there for sure.
Great. Anne, anything from you?
Well, I just reiterate really what the other two have already said. You know, there will be a need for ongoing training for everyone, but I do think that there's plenty of support out there from accountants, from the Institute of Agricultural Sectors, and also from software providers. You know, us like the others in the agricultural sector, I'm sure. You know, we're putting on a lot of training sessions and trying, you know, to make sure that those are available as webinars, as you know, or on-site training, etc., so that, you know, whatever works best, there's something available for everybody.
Great. Okay. Well, we will go to some questions from the floor. Just so I don't get myself in trouble with GDPR and things, I will just say people's first names. So we got a question in very quickly from Ruth. She was hot off the mark. Her question to the panel was, is the submission under Making Tax Digital for returns dated after the 1st of April, or for any returns submitted after the 1st of April, i.e. the February or March return? Russell, are you best suited to answer this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just to clarify on that one then, the first VAT return for MTD will be the first VAT return that will commence after the 1st of April. So I believe in Anne's very much sort of covered that in terms of, this was probably a very early question.
There is a table, I think, that should be available, presumably, for anyone who's signed up for this. There's a table giving details of when you will have to sign up depending upon your quarterly dates.
Fantastic. Okay, moving swiftly on. Question in from Andrew. He says his turnover is below 85,000. Will we be able to carry on just entering the figures into the HMRC website? Anne, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You'll be able to carry on using the existing system.
Perfect. Nice and easy. I hope that answers your question, Andrew. So, another one in from Lynn. Will HMRC collect individual transactions under Making Tax Digital for VAT? Who wants to take
I can do that one as well if you like, because
sure.
Obviously been involved with the software, and I can tell you categorically that no, it's just the totals, just the 9-box totals that go to HMRC. They have a little bit of extra information that's sent, which is sort of anti-fraud information, so they've a bit of information about the computer you're sending the data from, things like that. But the actual figures themselves are just the 9 VAT boxes.
Fantastic. Okay, so a question in from Diane. Russell, this one's sort of aimed at you. Diane asks, is anyone using the QuickBooks software? Is this something the accountancy gentleman would recommend? And also Diane adds that they were excellent presentations. So, Russell, can you answer that one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane, for that. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of clients that are using QuickBooks out there, and absolutely it has its place. But as the guys have both said today, both Anne and Christine, and very much how we approach it with our clients, is it's on a what suits you base. So QuickBooks, yes, it does have its place, and it's very good if used correctly. But that being said, if you're after, and we're here talking about making tax digital for the rural community, is that providing the information that you need and you want to get from your data? So yes, it does have a place, but subsequently, if you want more rural or farming-based information, then a more sort of farm-tailored package would possibly be more suitable.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Does anyone, Anne or Christine, do you want to come in on that point at all?
Yeah, I think it's quite important just to ensure that our own idiosyncrasies, such as the deductions, from the market or the grain sales or anything like that, ensure that you can do those as easily as possible. With the bespoke systems are all geared up to do that quite easily for you, whereas some of the general accountancy packages, as we've been going around the country on the workshops we've been hearing, there's a variety of different ways that you need to do that on the general accountancy systems. So just another thing to bear in mind as to whether the general ones can handle all the little extra bits and pieces that we come across.
Super. Anne, anything from you on that point?
Yeah, no, I would just reiterate what Christine says there, I think.
Great. We've got a relatively related question from Kathleen. She says she uses Promar FBA. Am I correct in thinking this uses Farm Plan? Anne, is that?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. I will just jump in with another question, and I suppose this is for the whole panel. I suppose in the media we hear a lot of negatives about making tax digital. What are the real opportunities? Christine, you mentioned about maybe reviewing processes that haven't changed in a little while. What does each of the panel members think making tax digital will change for the better? Let's start with Christine.
Right. I think the most striking thing that we've come across is there's now the transition for actually preparing the figures being moved from the old generation, and don't get me wrong, they've been doing an absolute sterling job for years. But this, with the incorporation of software, it is getting handed over to the younger generation, and that's really, really good to see, because they have got a genuine interest. It's their futures, and so it is presenting that opportunity. We have come across 82-year-olds still doing the bookkeeping. And at the other side of it, we've seen people in their 40s who haven't really seen the bank statement for the business. I think sort of it's embracing this change and being able to move things forward, and actually it's giving you the opportunity to move on to software that can really look at in depth on your business as a whole, some management information as well as the legislative stuff.
Great. Anne, what do you think is the biggest opportunity?
Well, one of the things I was quite struck by recently was I went to a presentation where it was a presentation about making tax digital, and the poll was done of people in the room who had moved from manual or spreadsheet systems onto proper accounting systems. And the most striking thing was that when they were asked, these people, whether any of them would prefer to move back to their old system, and not a single one said yes. So although it seems like quite an upheaval to move onto a digital record keeping system, they found that the value that they were getting out of the information was so much superior to the value of the manual cash books or even their spreadsheets that that they actually thought it had been worth the investment, and were pleased that they had moved.
Fantastic. And Russell, what about yourself?
For me, really, the biggest opportunity there and the benefit from MTD is the fact that you've got the real-time information there. You're no longer having to necessarily deal with the historic numbers. It allows businesses to make informed decisions in terms of planning. Allows more opportunity to speak with your advisors in terms of what you're trying to look to do with the business going forward, whether that's tax planning, whether that's succession planning, or whether that is basically looking to diversify in the market. Like we said before, we've got Brexit coming around the corner at the moment, and there's quite a lot of farmers worried about their subsidies, and there's quite a lot that looking to consider diversification. And also, it sort of, by having that information, it also makes any sort of financing and borrowing requirement that little easier. In terms of the bank are a lot more sort of positive in terms of lending if they've got sort of some actual data to hang their hats on. So that's sort of what I'm seeing in the marketplace at the moment for the clients that have already moved to digital.
Super, thank you, Russell. So we'll go back to a few more questions from the floor. Do keep them coming in if you have any burning questions. This one in from Emma. What software can cope with giving different VAT codes to inputs and outputs in order to help with partial exemption calculations? What advice can you give re-software on businesses that are partially exempt? So 2 for the price of 1 on that one. Christine, do you want to take that one?
Yes, the dreaded partial exemption. To be quite honest, I mean, sort of a lot of the partial exemption things of the calculations have been done using a spreadsheet in the past outside systems, and then sort of combining the figures. Well, obviously, with Making VAT Digital, those calculations have to be done using journals. I think all the different softwares across the board can cope with all that. Again, it's actually speaking to each individual software company to see how they actually deal with that. Perhaps, Sam, you might like a word on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the calculation itself, it doesn't form part of the digital record keeping requirements, so it's perfectly okay to do that outside of the software in a spreadsheet or whatever. But what you have got to do is ensure that once you've worked out your figures, you put a journal into your software to adjust the VAT return to reflect those partial exemption adjustments. There are software packages. I mean, obviously I'm speaking from FarmPlan, but I'm sure there are others as well which have the facility to flag more than your standard VAT code, so you can sort of create some other codes which then help when you're trying to identify partially exempt transactions. Certainly that is within the FarmPlan software, so that's helpful. But you'd still traditionally export your various categories of figures into a spreadsheet to do your calculation there, and then journal in the result.
Super. Anything from you to add there, Russell?
I don't think so. No, it's absolutely what we do on our clients with partial exemption. We basically take the data from the software, do the calculations outside, and then flush it through by way of journal.
Super. Okay, so moving on, a question from Anne. Is it correct that the April VAT return will need to be submitted by the 7th of May at the latest, and each further VAT return submitted before the 7th of the following month? Russell, can you pick up on that one?
I'm assuming is this one, well, possibly from 2 angles here. If they're looking at doing a monthly return, then obviously you'd still have the exact same deadlines anyway. So it would be the subsequent month end, and you still get the 7 days period of grace. So if it was an April VAT return, being the single month of April, you would obviously have that due by the end of May, but that would be the 7th of June, not the 7th of May. So the actual filing periods aren't changing at all.
Fantastic. Okay, I think that clears that one up from Anne, unless anybody has anything else to add.
No, that's fine.
No, that's it.
Perfect. Okay. And we've briefly mentioned on this webinar about a soft landing approach during the first year of Making Tax Digital. Does anyone want to sort of expand on what the soft landing is going to be and what that means for people?
Well, I'm quite happy to take this one. The soft landing approach, really, it's not to do with filing your VAT returns using digital software. That has to be done. There's no sort of, you can do it a little bit later and that's fine. The soft landing actually is really talking about where you're combining data from more than one software package, so that what they want you to do in the long run is digitally combine. If you've got your farm shop in QuickBooks for the sake of argument, and maybe your livestock enterprise in FarmPlan, and you need to add those VAT figures together to submit to HMRC as one VAT registered business, that combining of them, you can't just cut and paste them or type the figures in any longer. The idea is that combining will be a digital process, but HMRC have said that they will allow an additional 12 months for that process to become digital. So that is the soft landing period that they're talking about. You still have to meet the general filing requirements by the 1st of April 2019. This is a soft landing period for combining figures only. It's really to help out those great big companies that have sort of bespoke systems and diverse enterprises where software doesn't exist. The basic packages we've already spoken about really deal very well with straightforward situations, but these situations are a little bit outside the norm, so it's giving everyone a bit more time to comply with the regulations in these situations.
Fantastic, thank you, Anne. Very comprehensive answer. I don't suppose there's anything to add, is there, Christine or Russell, on that one?
No, I don't think so. I think that, as long as everybody makes that effort to move on, I think HMRC, we would hope, is sympathetic.
Yes, certainly in my conversations with them, they're not looking at, and I think Russell's already covered this with his penalties, they're not looking to take action against people who have genuinely tried to meet the requirements. They're very much talking about as long as you pay your amounts on time, if you're late submitting because you've got technical issues, then they will, look kindly on that. That's not actually what the soft landing period is about, but they have said that in addition.
Super. Okay, we've still got time for a few more questions. So, once someone has signed up for making tax digital, I'm struggling with that today. Once someone has signed up for making tax digital, can I carry on using the old method until I am ready to start? Russell?
No, is the answer to that one. Once you've signed up and registered for MTD, then you're in. You can't opt out unless you deregister for VAT then. So if anybody's out there voluntarily taking this out early, unfortunately you've opted in, you're within the pilot scheme at the moment, and you will need to comply continually going forward, whether you're above the threshold or not.
Fantastic. Anne, Christine, anything to add on that one?
No, I completely agree. You if you drop below the threshold, you still have to stay in. Once you've signed up, you're in.
And I think the actual signing up process is there's a series of things, a routine there that you have to follow as well, sort of firstly making sure that your software is compatible and then signing up. I just started to see letters coming out from HMRC last week, just sort of explaining that process, and I think they have actually got things quite well covered within those letters that are going to people that are currently over the threshold.
I mean, I must say they did start off having a few issues with people who had enthusiastically signed up on the HMRC website when they saw they were able to do so, and then realised that they didn't have any software that could actually send an MTD submission, and that caused quite a lot of chaos with HMRC initially because that loophole was didn't prevent them from doing that. So it's been tidied up a lot since then.
We had a few of those in our office that did that.
Yeah.
A government launching a scheme unprepared? Surely not, everyone. So, a few more questions just before we finish. So, one in from Caroline. Will there be a deadline to submit a quarterly return when we are claiming back VAT? Anybody to take that one?
I think we covered this one a moment ago, really, in terms of the deadline to submit your quarterly returns aren't changing at all.
Yep.
If you're claiming back VAT, like I say, the latest you can leave it would be a month and 7 days to get that submission made, but you can make that any time after the quarter end.
Fantastic. Thank you, Russell. One in from Keith. We currently make a VAT return monthly. Will we still be able to do this? I think this has been covered, but if Russell, are you able to just address that one?
Absolutely, not a problem. A lot of people in the farming sector will be doing this. So yeah, absolutely. If you're submitting monthly now, continue to submit monthly.
Great. One in from Catherine. She's urging us to please cover basic changes looking forward to Making Tax Digital SA commencing 2020. Does anybody want to take that?
I can say, just because obviously working on the development team, we are already looking at these things. HMRC haven't given us the detail at this stage. At least they've not given all of the detail. They've given some details. The limited information, I suppose, will be that they're talking about sending quarterly returns. The returns, again, will not be every transaction. They will just literally be totals for the different categories of transactions. And so it's a bit like a VAT return, really. The quarterly expenditure and quarterly income figures will be submitted, and then there'll be a fifth return at the end of the year where you can do all of your adjustments and year-end corrections, this sort of thing. So it's a long way from that happening at the moment. There's lots and lots of discussions going on, as you can imagine, because it's a very complicated subject. But we'll watch this space, I suppose.
And are there any indications, Anne, when we might be able to expect any more information? Or
it's gone very quiet, to be honest, at HMRC since Brexit. I think that a lot of the staff have been reassigned at the moment. So although they are still working on it and we're still getting things through, it's not being pushed at the pace it was earlier. Now, they're saying April 2020 at the earliest. They also said they were really keen not to introduce it until they were ready. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't one of these situations where it's been rushed and not thought through. So I think on that basis, from my point of view, I think it's unlikely to be April 2020, but I haven't heard that from HMRC.
Sure. Okay. Or Christine or Russell, anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I just think as well, sort of the complications that will be involved, or the detail that will need to be involved for Making Tax Digital. It may be advisable for those sort of using spreadsheets. I think I've heard Anne say in a presentation before that the use of spreadsheets going forward to Making Tax Digital will be quite complicated. And so perhaps now, instead of using the stick-in-plaster approach, perhaps now is the time to move on to the fully compatible software systems.
Right. Russell, anything from you on that one?
No, absolutely agree. In terms of the only additional that I've heard in terms of that would be eventually when it is proposed to come in, and like Anne said, it's going to be from April 2020 at the earliest. Although I also think that it's probably not going to happen at April 2020. It'll probably be delayed a little bit further once the VAT system's been sorted. That the other question I was always asked was, are we going to have to pay our income tax or corporation tax quarterly? Obviously, from what HMRC are saying on that, it will still be an annual payment. You just have an awareness of what your tax liability will be throughout the course of that year.
Yeah, that's the idea, but sadly with most agricultural businesses that won't actually be the reality, because there are so many adjustments that take place at the year end for agricultural businesses, as I'm sure you know, and it works very well for a straightforward business that buys and sells goods. You know, your turnover and your expenses every month are fairly standard, whereas in the agricultural sector, your income and expenditure are up and down all over the place, and then you've got all sorts of reliefs and allowances that you need to put through at the year end as well. So I personally think it's really unlikely to be much of a guide to agricultural businesses.
Super. Thank you, Anne. So we're having a bit of a flurry of late questions, so we will try and get through as many as we can. If anybody's question doesn't get answered after the webinar, do get in touch and send them in, and we will try and get back to as many people as we can. Catherine, we've just answered. So the next one is a quick one from Richard. Anne, where can I find the timetable chart that you shared earlier? Where can Richard find that?
Okay, are you going to be sharing these slides? Sorry, Jack, I wasn't sure whether you were going to be sharing them. If not, it's on our website anyway, on the Farm Plan website in the frequently asked questions section. If it's not there now, I shall check it when I'm back in at work that it is, but it will be there.
Perfect, and I'm sure all of the slides will be available on the landing page for the webinar afterwards. So if anybody's missed anything, I'm sure you'll be able to pick it all back up then. Question in from Michael. As a business, we are in the unfortunate position of just about to exceed the threshold in the next few weeks. So we are now in the process of VAT registration and MTD. Any advice? Russell.
So you're in the perfect position, really, in terms of you've probably not used any VAT filing software. You've probably not, or you obviously wouldn't have filed online with HMRC before. So using the new system is going to be new to you, but it's not going to be any different to what you've done before. So you're learning a new process for the first time, whereas other people are going to be processing it slightly differently. My recommendation and advice would be to speak to your advisor in terms of what software you would benefit from, and to then have a session and sit down and learn how to use and maximise that software for you.
Super. Christine or Anne, anything to add on that one?
Just absolutely. As Russell said, perfect position for going forward. We've had a lot of people on the workshops that are have been using one software. Now they're sort of questioning whether they should move, and so they've got lots of queries in their head. But you are in the absolute, you've put unfortunate position of just about to exceed it. But on the other side of things, you are fortunate in that you're going from a clean sheet. So just make sure you do your homework and you research, as Russell says.
Fantastic.
And one thing I'd like to say is that we've obviously had quite a few customers now in the pilot scheme, and who are using MTD successfully. And the most common response we get, or reaction we get from people that have moved to MTD, is that it's so easy. They seem to be expecting something much more complicated, but actually, once you've got your software set up, you just literally click submit. And it's not complicated at all. It's actually easier than having to log on to your HMRC website and put your figures in there.
I think actually as well with that, we've all been through the real-time process when we moved over with the payroll. We've had auto-enrolment with pensions, and there is a lot of information out there, but it is nice, as Anne says, to know that actually it will just be another press of a button or just another small routine to follow once everything is up and ready.
Super. And just very, very quickly, last question. How long does it take to sign up for Making Tax Digital, assuming you submit by the existing online system?
Well, I'll take that one. I'll probably know more than the others because I've seen quite a few of these go through. Signing up for Making Tax Digital can be a quick process, but HMRC say allows 72 hours. The existing online system has got nothing to do with it. The existing online system is a completely separate system as far as HMRC are concerned. It makes no difference whether your software used to populate figures on their existing system or whether you had to type them in manually. It's still an old system, and they're moving your records off that old system onto their new system, and that's what takes the time.
Fantastic. Okay, we are running perilously close to running out of time. So before we finish, we're just going to put the same poll back up that we saw at the beginning, just to see if people are more informed about Making Tax Digital now than they were at the beginning. So you should be seeing that poll coming up on screens, and I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and we will wait for the results. And I just can see there's a few questions that haven't been answered, so we will get to those. I don't know whether we will email you from this, or if you want to email them in as well, we will try and get as many answered as possible. Just wait for those results to come in. Just a reminder, the poll when we started, we had 59% of people saying they thought they were prepared for making tax digital, and 41% said they were not. And I've just had someone say in my ear that we will answer your questions directly on here if you haven't been answered, so do not fear. And just whilst we wait for those poll results to come in, I would like to take this time to thank our speakers, Russell, Anne and Christine. We've covered a lot of ground today with some really, really in-depth and interesting conversations. And thank you to everybody that took part. Again, had some really, really good questions come in, a big, big diversity of them. So it's been, very enjoyable. The poll results are in. We have an overwhelming 86.8% of people saying they now feel more positively and more prepared for making tax digital. So I guess this webinar has been something of a success. So thank you again to our three speakers. We will answer any questions that haven't been answered so far, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.